The fluorescent lights in the grocery store buzzed overhead like angry wasps. Daniel pushed the shopping cart down the cereal aisle, one wheel wobbling with a rhythmic squeak that matched the exhaustion pounding behind his eyes. 6:30 on a Tuesday evening, and the store smelled like floor wax and something vaguely citrus from the cleaning solution they used on the produce section. He'd left work at 5, picked up his son from after-school care at 5:45, and now they were here, trying to remember if they had milk at home or if that carton in the fridge had expired last week. His son, Leo, sat in the front of the cart, legs dangling through the openings, sneakers lighting up with every swing. 7 years old and still small for his age, with dark curls that refused to be tamed and eyes that were too old for his face. Those eyes tracked every woman who passed by with an intensity that made Daniel's chest tighten. "We need the one with the tiger," Leo said, pointing at a box of sugar-laden cereal that Daniel had already decided against 3 times this month. "We need the one with actual nutrition," Daniel replied, reaching for the store brand with whole grains nobody would enjoy. Leo's face fell, but he didn't argue. That was the part that hurt most. A year ago, Leo would have lobbied, negotiated, deployed the full force of 7-year-old persistence. Now he just accepted disappointment like it was weather. Daniel added the cereal to the cart and moved toward the dairy section. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his boss about tomorrow's presentation. He'd forgotten to finish the slides. Of course he had. He'd also forgotten to sign Leo's permission slip for the field trip, return the library books that were now 2 weeks overdue, and schedule that dental appointment the school nurse had flagged as urgent. The list in his head never got shorter. It just evolved, sprouted new items, multiplied like something cellular and unstoppable. "Dad," Leo said quietly. "That lady has pretty hair." Daniel glanced up. A woman stood near the organic milk, mid-30s maybe, with auburn hair pulled back in a loose braid. She wore a navy blue coat and was reading the label on a yogurt container with the focus of someone who actually had time to care about probiotics. "Uh-huh," Daniel said, not really paying attention. He grabbed the milk they always bought and checked his phone again. 7 unread emails. "I'm going to talk to her." That got Daniel's attention. He looked down at Leo, whose small face had set with a determination that sent alarm bells ringing through Daniel's fatigue-soaked brain. "Leo, no, we don't bother." But Leo was already climbing out of the cart with the speed of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be deterred. His light-up sneakers hit the linoleum, and he walked straight toward the woman with the auburn hair, small shoulders squared like he was marching into battle. Daniel abandoned the cart and followed, heart suddenly hammering. Leo had been acting strange lately, asking questions about his mother that Daniel didn't know how to answer, staring at women in restaurants and parks with an expression that broke something inside Daniel every single time. But this was different. This had purpose behind it. The woman noticed Leo approaching and smiled the way adults do when a child is nearby, polite and slightly uncertain. "Excuse me," Leo said, his voice clear and carrying in the quiet aisle. "Hello there," the woman replied, lowering the yogurt. Daniel reached them just as Leo asked the question, words that fell into the air like stones into still water. "Can you be my new mom?" The woman's smile froze. Her eyes widened. The yogurt container slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a wet smack, vanilla cream exploding across the tiles. Daniel felt his face ignite with heat, mortification, flooding through him so intense it felt physical. An older couple shopping nearby stopped, openly staring. A teenage employee stocking shelves pulled out an earbud to listen. "Leo, oh my God, I'm so sorry," Daniel started, reaching for his son's shoulder, but the woman was staring at Leo with an expression Daniel couldn't read. Not anger, not amusement, something else. Something that looked almost like recognition. "What's your name?" she asked Leo, ignoring Daniel entirely. Leonardo. But everyone calls me Leo, except my dad when he's mad. Then he says Leonardo James, which means I'm in trouble. Leo, the woman repeated softly. Her voice had changed, gone shaky. And your last name? Ma'am, I'm really sorry about this, Daniel interrupted, finally getting his hand on Leo's shoulder. He's been going through something. We've been going through something, and I apologize for... Mitchell, Leo said. Leo Mitchell, and this is my dad, Daniel Mitchell. The woman's face went completely white. She took a step backward, hand coming up to her mouth. Her eyes, Daniel noticed with growing alarm, were filling with tears. Are you okay? Daniel asked, forgetting his embarrassment in the face of her obvious distress. You live here, she whispered, in this town. Yeah, over on Maple Street, the apartments near... Emma's son, the woman breathed. You're Emma's son. The world tilted. Daniel's grip on Leo's shoulder tightened involuntarily. That name, his ex-wife's name, spoken by a stranger in a grocery store like an incantation, like a key turning in a lock he didn't know existed. How do you know my mum? Leo asked, wonder replacing the determined sadness in his voice. The woman was crying now, actual tears sliding down her face, and she made no move to wipe them away. She looked at Daniel with an intensity that made him want to step backward, to grab Leo and run, but his feet wouldn't move. I'm Claire, she said. Claire Morrison. I've been looking for you for 3 years. The overhead lights kept buzzing. Someone's cart squeaked past. The teenage employee finally moved to clean up the spilled yogurt, and Daniel stood frozen, his son's question hanging unanswered in the air, while this stranger who knew his ex-wife's name looked at them both like they were ghosts she'd been searching for in the dark. The thing about exhaustion, Daniel had learned, was that it made you slow. Thoughts that should connect instantly took minutes to form. Danger that should trigger immediate flight instead just sat there, observed from a distance, like something happening to someone else. I don't understand, he said. Claire Morrison wiped at her face with the back of her hand, smearing mascara. Not here, she said. Please, can we talk somewhere? Just for a few minutes? Every parental instinct Daniel possessed screamed no. You don't go anywhere with strangers. You don't let them near your child. You don't trust tears or coincidences or anyone who claims to have been looking for you. But Leo's small hand slipped into his, and when Daniel looked down, his son was staring up at Claire Morrison with something Daniel hadn't seen in his face for 8 months. Hope. There's a coffee shop, Daniel heard himself say, 2 blocks from here. Claire nodded quickly, almost desperately. Yes, thank you. I'll meet you there. 20 minutes? Daniel agreed, before his brain caught up to his mouth. Claire Morrison walked away quickly, leaving her shopping cart abandoned in the middle of the aisle, the spilled yogurt already being mopped up by the employee who looked deeply uncomfortable with whatever drama he'd just witnessed. Dad, Leo whispered, tugging on Daniel's hand. She knew, Mom. We don't know that for sure, buddy. But Leo's face had transformed. The careful, sad acceptance had cracked, revealing the 7-year-old boy underneath. Excited, alive, desperate for something Daniel couldn't name. They left without finishing the shopping. Daniel drove to the coffee shop on autopilot, his mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. Emma had left when Leo was 4. Just left. A note on the kitchen table, her clothes gone from the closet, and a bank account drained down to $53. No forwarding address. No explanation beyond 3 words. I'm sorry, Daniel. He'd tried to find her. Of course he had. Filed a missing person report that went nowhere because she'd left of her own volition. Hired a private investigator he couldn't afford, who found nothing. Eventually, after 2 years of silence, he'd filed for divorce on grounds of abandonment. The courts had granted it. Emma Mitchell had simply disappeared, leaving behind a confused toddler and a husband who'd spent 3 years wondering what he'd done wrong. And now, this stranger claimed to have been looking for them. For what? Why? The coffee shop was nearly empty, just 2 college students with laptops and an elderly man reading a newspaper. Daniel ordered hot chocolate for Leo and black coffee for himself, not because he wanted it, but because he needed something to do with his hands. They sat at a corner table, Leo swinging his legs, humming tunelessly, his entire body vibrating with anticipation. Claire Morrison arrived 12 minutes later, slightly out of breath, her eyes red but her face composed. She'd fixed her makeup and pulled her coat tighter like armor. She approached their table slowly, and Daniel saw her hands were shaking. "Thank you," she said, sitting down across from them without ordering anything. "Thank you for not just leaving." "You said you knew Emma," Daniel said flatly. No politeness, no warmth, just information. Claire looked at Leo, then at Daniel, and something passed across her face that looked like pain. "I did. I do. Emma and I were friends. Best friends, actually, from college until about 4 years ago. 4 years ago, when Emma left." "She never mentioned you," Daniel said. "No, I imagined she wouldn't have." Claire folded her hands on the table, knuckles white. "We had a falling out, a bad one. I said things I shouldn't have said, and she cut me off completely, changed her number, moved. I tried to find her, tried to apologize, but she was gone. And then about a year after that, I found out why she ran." Leo was listening with the total absorption children have when adults are discussing things they're not supposed to understand. Daniel wanted to send him to another table, to protect him from whatever was coming, but he also knew that Leo deserved answers. His son had spent 3 years asking where his mother was, why she left, if it was his fault. "Why did she run?" Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire's eyes filled with tears again. "Emma was sick, Daniel. Really sick. And she was terrified." The words landed like physical blows. Daniel felt his breath catch, his vision narrow. Sick. Emma was sick. "What do you mean, sick?" His voice sounded strange, distant. "She found a lump 2 months before she left you. She went to the doctor alone, got the diagnosis alone, and she panicked. I know this because her mother finally told me, after I'd been searching for a year. Emma's mom was dying herself, cancer actually, the same kind Emma was afraid she had, and she told me everything before she passed, made me promise I'd find you, find Leo." The coffee shop felt too bright, too loud. The espresso machine hissing in the background sounded like screaming. "Emma's mom died," Daniel said stupidly. He'd met Emma's mother twice, a cold woman who'd made it clear she thought Emma was too young to get married, that Daniel wasn't good enough, that the whole thing was a mistake. "Last year," Claire confirmed. And with her dying words, she told me that Emma had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer, that she'd been too scared to tell you, that she'd run because she didn't want you to watch her die. Leo made a small sound, almost a whimper. Daniel looked down at his son and saw tears streaming down the small face, saw the light-up sneakers kicking against the chair leg in distress. "Is she dead?" Leo asked, his voice breaking. "Is my mom dead?" Claire's face crumpled. "I don't know, sweetheart. I've been trying to find her for 3 years. That's why when you said your name in the store, when you asked me to be your mom, I couldn't believe it. After all this time, you found me." Daniel felt something crack open inside his chest. Rage, maybe, or grief. Or the terrible dawning realization that Emma hadn't left because she stopped loving them. She'd left because she loved them too much to let them watch her suffer. "Why didn't she tell me?" The question came out raw, damaged. "Why didn't she trust me enough to stay?" Claire reached across the table, then stopped, her hand hovering in the space between them. Emma's mom died of cancer. Her grandmother died of cancer. She watched them waste away, watched the chemo destroy them, watched her father leave because he couldn't handle it. Emma was convinced that if she told you, you'd either leave or stay out of obligation, and she couldn't handle either option. So she ran. She was wrong, Daniel. I told her she was wrong. That's what we fought about. I told her she was being selfish, that she was abandoning her family, and she cut me off completely. And I've regretted those words every single day since. The elderly man had left. The college students were packing up their laptops, shooting curious glances at their table where a woman was crying and a child was crying and a grown man was trying very hard not to cry. "Do you know where she is now?" Daniel asked. Claire shook her head. No. Her mother thought she might have gone to Oregon. Emma always talked about Oregon, but that was 3 years ago. She could be anywhere. She could be... She trailed off, looking at Leo, not wanting to say the word in front of him. Dead. Emma could be dead. Leo was openly sobbing now, small shoulders shaking. Daniel pulled his son onto his lap, wrapped his arms around the small body, and felt something inside him break completely. All the exhaustion, all the anger, all the confusion of the past 3 years crystallized into one terrible truth. Emma had been suffering alone, dying alone maybe, because she'd been too afraid to trust him. "I would have stayed," he whispered into Leo's hair. "I would have fought. We would have fought together." "I know," Claire said, tears still streaming down her face. Emma knew it too, deep down. That's what scared her most. They sat there in the coffee shop as the evening light faded outside, 3 people bound together by one woman's fear and love and terrible misguided choice. And Leo's question hung in the air between them, unanswered still, because Claire Morrison couldn't be his new mom. Nobody could. Because his real mom was out there somewhere, sick or recovering or gone, and they had no way to find her. Unless they did. Daniel looked up at Claire, saw her staring at Leo with an expression that was part grief, part determination. "You've been looking for her," he said, "for 3 years. You didn't give up." "No," Claire agreed. "I couldn't. Emma was like my sister, and I owed her an apology. I owed her the chance to know that I understood, that I was sorry for judging her, for not supporting her when she needed me most." "Then keep looking," Daniel said, "but this time we'll help you." Claire's breath caught. "You mean—" "We find her," Daniel said firmly, feeling Leo still in his arms, listening. "Together. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. We find Emma, and we bring her home." For the first time since they'd sat down, Claire smiled. It was watery and broken, but real. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, we find her." Leo lifted his head from Daniel's shoulder, his face wet and red and hopeful again. "We're going to find Mom?" "We're going to try, buddy. We're going to try as hard as we can." And in that moment, in a coffee shop on a Tuesday evening, 3 people made a promise to a woman who'd tried to disappear. They would find her. They would bring her home. They would prove that love was stronger than fear, that family was worth fighting for, that nobody had to face the dark alone, even if it destroyed them trying. The drive home was quiet. Leo fell asleep in the back seat, exhausted from crying, his small face still bearing the tracks of tears. Daniel gripped the steering wheel and watched the streetlights blur past, his mind already racing ahead to impossible tasks. How do you find someone who doesn't want to be found? How do you search for a ghost? Claire had given him her number, promised to send everything she'd learned in 3 years of searching. Hospital records she'd sweet-talked out of sympathetic nurses. Old credit card statements from before Emma had gone completely off-grid. Names of distant cousins who might have heard something, seen something, knew something. It wasn't much, but it was more than Daniel had possessed an hour ago. At home, he carried Leo inside, put him to bed still in his clothes, because waking him seemed cruel. His son's small hand clutched at Daniel's shirt, even in sleep, and Daniel stood there for a long moment just watching him breathe. 7 years old, too young to lose a mother, too young to understand that sometimes people leave because they love you, not because they don't. Daniel's apartment was small, 2 bedrooms that barely fit their lives. Emma's ghost lived here still. In the photos Daniel couldn't quite bring himself to take down, in the coffee mug she'd chosen, in the way Leo sometimes tilted his head exactly like she used to. For 3 years, Daniel had been trying to erase her, to move on, to build a life that didn't include the woman who'd abandoned them. Now, he had to do the opposite. He had to dig up every memory, every detail, every small piece of information that might lead him to her. He had to remember everything he'd been trying to forget. His phone buzzed, a text from Claire. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you probably hate me for dropping this on you, but I meant what I said. We'll find her, together." Daniel typed back, "I don't hate you. Thank you for not giving up on her." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, Emma used to talk about Leo all the time, about how smart he was, how funny, how much he looked like you. She loved him more than anything. She loved you both. The cancer just loved her differently. Daniel set the phone down before he could respond, before the grief could choke him. He walked to his bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out the box he'd shoved into the back corner 2 years ago. Emma's things, the belongings she'd left behind, a sweater that still smelled faintly of her perfume. A journal she'd kept sporadically, filled with grocery lists and random observations, and nothing that explained why she'd gone. A photo album from their wedding, both of them so young and stupid and happy. He sat on the floor and went through it all, looking for clues he'd missed before. But there was nothing obvious. No secret phone numbers, no cryptic messages, just the detritus of a life interrupted. His phone rang, unknown number. Daniel almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. "Mr. Mitchell," a woman's voice, professional and careful. "Yes." "My name is Rebecca Chen. I'm a social worker with the county. Claire Morrison called me about an hour ago, said you might need some resources, support for your son, given the circumstances." Daniel closed his eyes, of course, because this wasn't just about finding Emma anymore. This was about Leo, who'd just learned his mother left because she was sick, who'd been carrying the weight of abandonment for 3 years without knowing the truth. "He's going to need help processing this," Rebecca continued gently. "And honestly, you probably will too. I'd like to set up an appointment, just to talk, to make sure you both have what you need." Daniel agreed, because what else could he do? They scheduled for Thursday evening, 2 days away. When he hung up, the apartment felt too quiet, pressing in on him from all sides. He went back to Leo's room, sat in the chair beside the small bed, and watched his son sleep. In the dim light from the hallway, Leo looked impossibly young, fragile, like something Daniel had to protect from the world, from the truth, from everything. But he couldn't protect Leo from this. The truth was already out there, already changing the shape of their lives. Emma had cancer. Emma had run. Emma might be dying, might already be dead, might be somewhere fighting alone because she'd been too afraid to ask for help. Daniel's phone buzzed again. An email from Claire. Subject line, "What I know." He opened it. 3 years of research condensed into bullet points. Emma's last known location, Portland, Oregon, spotted by a college acquaintance in a coffee shop 14 months ago, but gone before the acquaintance could approach. Medical records from before she left, positive biopsy, recommendation for aggressive treatment, appointments scheduled and then cancelled. Credit card activity stopped completely 8 months after she left, suggesting she'd gone entirely to cash. Social media, all accounts deleted. But there was one more thing. A private investigator in Portland. Someone Claire had worked with. Someone who'd agreed to keep looking even after Claire ran out of money to pay him. His name was Marcus Webb, and according to Claire's email, he'd called her 6 months ago with a possible lead that had gone nowhere. A woman matching Emma's description, volunteering at a homeless shelter downtown. But she'd given a different name and disappeared before he could confirm. A homeless shelter. Daniel felt sick. Emma, who'd grown up comfortable, who'd always been particular about her clothes and her hair and her space, living in a homeless shelter. Dying in a homeless shelter, maybe. He forwarded the email to himself, then started making a list. Time off work. He'd have to talk to his boss, explain something without explaining everything. Someone to watch Leo if he had to travel. Savings. Not much, but enough for a plane ticket maybe, a few nights in a cheap hotel. Claire's investigator, Marcus Webb, he'd call him tomorrow, see if there was anything new, anything real. The exhaustion he'd felt earlier had transformed into something else. Adrenaline, maybe. Purpose. For 3 years, Daniel had been treading water, trying to keep himself and Leo afloat, trying to survive. Now he had something to swim toward. Even if it was impossible, even if it destroyed them. He must have fallen asleep in the chair because he woke to Leo shaking his shoulder, morning light streaming through the window. "Dad, you slept here." "Yeah, buddy. Sorry." Daniel's neck ached. His back screamed protest as he stood. Leo climbed into the chair, tucking his knees up, looking smaller than 7. "Are we really going to find Mom?" Daniel crouched down, bringing himself to eye level with his son. "We're going to try everything we can. But Leo, I need you to understand something. Your mom left because she was sick and scared, not because of anything you did, not because she didn't love you. Miss Claire said she has cancer." "Yeah." "Like what killed Mrs. Patterson down the hall. Mrs. Patterson had died 4 months ago. Her daughter had been cleaning out the apartment for weeks, and Leo had asked questions Daniel hadn't wanted to answer." "Similar, yeah." Leo was quiet for a moment, processing. "So Mom might be dead." Daniel's heart clenched. She might be, or she might be okay. We don't know. That's why we have to look. What if we find her and she's still sick? What if she doesn't want to see us? These were the questions Daniel had been avoiding all night. "Then we deal with it, together, but at least we'll know, Leo. At least she won't be alone anymore." Leo nodded slowly, then wrapped his thin arms around Daniel's neck. "I'm scared, Dad." "Me too, buddy. Me too." They stayed like that for a long moment, father and son, holding on to each other while the morning light grew brighter and the impossible task ahead of them waited. Daniel called in sick to work, then spent the morning on the phone. First Marcus Webb, the investigator, who answered on the 3rd ring with a voice that sounded like gravel and cigarettes. "Marcus Webb. Mr. Webb, my name is Daniel Mitchell. Claire Morrison gave me your contact information." There was a pause. Then, "You're the husband." "Ex-husband, technically. The divorce just finalized." "Claire said you might call. Said the kid asked a stranger to be his mom in a grocery store, and it turned out to be Claire herself. Hell of a coincidence." More like hell of a disaster," Daniel said. "Claire said you had a lead 6 months ago. A shelter in Portland." "Yeah, Redemption House. Woman volunteering there, mid-30s, fit the description, but she was using the name Sarah Bennett, and when I tried to verify, she vanished. Shelter director said she'd only been there 2 weeks, hadn't given them any real contact information. Trail went cold after that." "Could it have been her?" "Could have been anyone," Marcus admitted. "I've chased down 12 possible Emmas in 3 years. Most weren't even close. A few could have been, but without cooperation from the person, you're stuck. Can't exactly force someone to give a DNA sample." Daniel rubbed his eyes. "What would you do if you were me?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I'd go to Portland. Not to search, not at first. Just to be there. Put up flyers with your contact information, your son's picture. Not missing person. That'll spook her if she's trying to stay hidden. Something softer. Emma, please come home. We love you. We understand. Leave them at the shelters, the free clinics, the places someone living off-grid might see them, and then you wait. That could take months, years. Or it could take a week, or she could be in Florida, and you'd never know. But it's better than nothing, and it's cheaper than hiring me to keep chasing ghosts. Daniel appreciated the honesty. They talked for another 20 minutes. Marcus giving him names of shelters, clinics, churches that ran meal programs. Places Emma might go if she was sick and broke and trying to survive. The list was long, too long. When he hung up, Leo was standing in the doorway holding his backpack. "Aren't we going to school?" he asked. Daniel had completely forgotten. Wednesday, work day, school day, the regular world that kept turning regardless of personal catastrophe. "Yeah, buddy. Yeah, we're going." He drove Leo to school, watched his son walk into the building with shoulders that seemed weighted down by knowledge too heavy for them. Then Daniel went to work because he had to, because bills existed and rent was due, and you couldn't just abandon your life because the past had suddenly rewritten itself. His boss, Margaret, caught him in the hallway. "You look terrible. Rough couple of days. The presentation is this afternoon. You ready?" The presentation, right. The one he'd forgotten to finish. "Can we push it to tomorrow?" Margaret's expression shifted from concerned to annoyed. "Daniel, this is the third time this month you've asked to reschedule something. I know you're dealing with a lot at home, but I need to be able to count on you." "I know, I'm sorry. Tomorrow, I promise." She agreed reluctantly, and Daniel spent the rest of the day in his cubicle, staring at spreadsheets that refused to make sense. His mind 3 states away in Portland, where his ex-wife might be dying alone. At lunch, he called Claire. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'm not, but I'm functional. That counts for something. I sent everything I have to Marcus, too. Told him to give you whatever help he could. Have you talked to Leo's school? About what? About getting him excused if you need to travel, about getting him counseling resources. Daniel, this is going to be hard on him. On both of you." Daniel knew she was right. He called the school counselor, Mrs. Yang, and left a message. He called his sister in California, who he hadn't spoken to in 6 months, and explained the situation in 30 seconds before she could interrupt. She promised to fly out if he needed help with Leo. Everyone was being so helpful, so supportive, and Daniel felt like he was drowning, like the water was rising faster than he could bail it out, and eventually something was going to give. That evening, after he'd picked up Leo and they'd eaten dinner in relative silence, his phone rang. Unknown number again. "Daniel Mitchell. Speaking. This is Redemption House in Portland. We got your message for Sarah Bennett." Daniel's heart stopped. "You did? She came in about an hour ago. Said to tell you she's not ready, but she wanted you to know she's alive." The phone almost slipped from Daniel's grip. "Wait, is she still there? Can I talk to her?" "She's gone. Left right after she gave us the message. But she said to tell your son she thinks about him every day, that she's sorry, that she's trying." Daniel couldn't speak. His throat had closed completely. Across the room, Leo was watching him with wide eyes, sensing something. "Sir?" the woman on the phone prompted. "Thank you," Daniel managed. "Thank you for calling. If she comes back, can you give her my number? Can you tell her we want to help?" "I can tell her. But, Mr. Mitchell, I've been doing this work for 15 years. If someone's running, they usually have a reason. Pushing too hard might send her further underground." "What should I do then?" The woman sighed. "Give her time, give her space, and maybe come to Portland, not to hunt her down. Just to be closer, so when she's ready, you're there. When she hung up, Daniel sat down heavily on the couch. Leo scrambled over, climbing into his lap like he used to when he was smaller. "Was that about Mom?" "Yeah, buddy. Someone saw her. In Portland. She's alive." Leo's face transformed. Joy, relief, and something else. Fear, maybe. "When can we go see her?" "It's not that simple. She's not ready to see us yet. But we know she's alive. We know she's okay. That's something." Leo was quiet for a moment, then, "Why isn't she ready? We're her family." How do you explain to a 7-year-old that sometimes love isn't enough? That sometimes people are so broken by fear that they can't accept help, can't come home, can't do anything but run? "Your mom is dealing with something really hard," Daniel said carefully. "And sometimes when things are hard, people need space to figure it out on their own before they can let anyone help." "But she's been gone 3 years." "I know. That's a long time to figure things out." "It is." Leo pressed his face against Daniel's chest, and Daniel felt the small body shaking, not crying, just trembling with the weight of it all. "What if she never gets ready?" Leo whispered. Daniel tightened his arms around his son. "Then we keep trying. We keep letting her know we're here. And we take care of each other while we wait." It wasn't the answer either of them wanted. But it was the truth. And Daniel was done lying to his son about this, about any of it. That night, after Leo was asleep, Daniel pulled out his laptop and started researching. Flights to Portland, apartments for rent, month to month, schools in the area for Leo. He couldn't just uproot their entire lives on the chance that Emma might eventually be ready to see them. Except he could. He absolutely could. His phone buzzed. A text from Claire. "Heard Redemption House called. I'm so glad she's alive. Are you okay?" Daniel typed back, "No, but I will be. We're going to Portland." "When?" "Soon as I can arrange it. 2 weeks, maybe." "I'm coming with you." Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. "You don't have to do that." "Yes, I do. Emma was my best friend. I owed her an apology 3 years ago, and I still owe it now. Besides, you can't do this alone." She was right. He couldn't. "Okay, thank you. We'll find her, Daniel. And when we do, we'll make sure she knows she doesn't have to be afraid anymore." Daniel hoped she was right. He hoped that love and persistence and sheer stubborn refusal to give up would be enough. Because the alternative, that Emma was lost to them forever, that she'd die alone and afraid without ever knowing they'd never stopped looking, was unbearable. He opened a new document and started writing. Not a flyer, a letter to Emma, from him and from Leo and from Claire, telling her they understood, telling her they forgave her, telling her to come home. He wrote until his eyes burned and his fingers cramped. He wrote until the words stopped making sense. And when he finally crawled into bed at 2 a.m, he dreamed of Portland, of rain-soaked streets and a woman with Emma's face turning away from him, always just out of reach. 2 weeks became 10 days, became a week. Daniel gave notice at his apartment, boxed up their lives, called his boss and explained he was taking a leave of absence. Margaret was less understanding this time, made it clear his job might not be waiting when he came back. Daniel thanked her and hung up, and didn't let himself think about what would happen if this failed. Claire flew in from Chicago 3 days before they were scheduled to leave. She met them at the apartment, now mostly empty, boxes stacked against the walls. "You're really doing this," she said, looking around. "We're really doing this." Leo came running from his room, carrying the stuffed elephant Emma had given him for his 2nd birthday. "Miss Claire, we're going to find Mom." Claire knelt down, pulling Leo into a hug. "We are, sweetheart. We're going to try our very hardest." They flew out on a Tuesday, the 3 of them crammed into economy seats. Leo pressed against the window, watching the clouds. Daniel held the letter he'd written, folded in his pocket, and wondered if Emma would ever read it. wondered if she'd care, wondered if, when they finally found her, she'd run again, or if she'd stay. Portland was raining when they landed. Of course it was. They took a cab to the apartment Daniel had rented sight unseen, a two-bedroom in a neighborhood that looked tired but not dangerous. Claire had gotten a hotel nearby, promised to come by in the morning to start their search. That first night, Daniel and Leo sat on the floor of the empty apartment and ate take-out pizza while rain drummed against the windows. "Do you think Mom can hear the rain too?" Leo asked. "Maybe." "Do you think she knows we're here?" "I don't know, buddy." Leo was quiet for a moment, then, "I'm going to draw her a picture, so when we find her, I can give it to her." "That's a good idea." Leo pulled out his markers and a piece of paper, and Daniel watched his son draw a family. 3 stick figures holding hands under a crooked sun. "Mom, Dad, and me," Leo wrote at the top in shaky letters. Daniel took a picture of it with his phone, then helped Leo pin it to the refrigerator in their new, temporary home. Outside, the rain kept falling. And somewhere in this city, Emma was alive, afraid, alone, but not for much longer. Because Daniel and Leo and Claire were here now, and they weren't leaving until they found her, even if it took forever. The next morning started with coffee that tasted wrong and a determination that felt equally bitter. Daniel stood at the window of their new apartment, watching Portland wake up beneath a sky that couldn't decide between rain and grey light. Leo was still asleep, curled around his stuffed elephant, and Daniel was grateful for the quiet. Claire arrived at 8, carrying a folder thick with papers and a map of the city marked with red circles. "These are all the places we know she might go," Claire said, spreading the map on the kitchen counter. "Shelters, free clinics, meal programs, libraries. I talked to Marcus yesterday. He's going to meet us at noon with some additional contacts." Daniel studied the map. There were at least 30 red circles, scattered across the city like drops of blood. This could take months. Then it takes months. We have time. But did they? Did Emma have time? If the cancer had progressed, if she'd been refusing treatment for 3 years? The thought was too heavy to hold. Daniel pushed it aside and focused on what he could control. Today. This moment. The first steps. They started at Redemption House, the shelter where Emma had last been seen. The director, a woman named Patricia with silver hair and kind eyes, remembered Sarah Bennett immediately. She volunteered for 2 weeks, helped in the kitchen, never said much, quiet, kept to herself. Patricia looked at the photo Daniel had brought, a picture of Emma from 4 years ago, smiling at Leo's 3rd birthday party. "That could be her. The bone structure's right. But the woman I knew had short hair, almost shaved. And she was thinner, much thinner." Daniel felt sick. "Did she seem sick?" "Everyone here is dealing with something," Patricia said carefully. "But yes, she seemed unwell. Tired all the time, bruises on her arms that looked like IV marks, maybe from treatment. I tried to get her to see our doctor, but she refused, and then she just stopped showing up." "When was this?" 6 months ago, like I told Mr. Webb." 6 months. The trail was ice cold. They left flyers with Patricia, the letter Daniel had written folded inside each one. Not missing person flyers. Just a photo of Leo smiling with simple text. "Emma, your family is in Portland. We love you. Please call." Daniel's phone number at the bottom. They repeated the process at 6 more shelters that day. Some directors were helpful, showing them around, letting them post flyers. Others were suspicious, protective of their clients' privacy. Daniel didn't blame them. The world had taught these people to be cautious. By 5 o'clock, they'd covered half the shelters on Claire's map, and Leo was exhausted. Daniel picked him up from the child-friendly cafe where he'd been waiting with coloring books and carried him back to the apartment. "Did you find her?" Leo asked sleepily. "Not yet, but we're looking." "Tomorrow?" Tomorrow. But tomorrow brought more empty shelters, more sympathetic shakes of the head, more flyers posted to bulletin boards already crowded with missing person notices and addiction recovery meetings and job postings nobody wanted. Daniel started to understand the scope of invisibility in a city this size, how easy it would be to disappear, how impossible to be found. On the fourth day, they got their first real lead. A clinic volunteer called the number on the flyer, said a woman matching Emma's description had been there last week. Daniel drove across the city in rush-hour traffic, his hands shaking on the steering wheel, Claire beside him calling ahead to make sure the volunteer would wait. The woman who met them was young, maybe 25, with nervous eyes. "I'm not supposed to give out patient information," she said. "But the woman in your photo, I think she's been coming here for treatment, chemotherapy, every Tuesday for the past 3 months. Daniel's vision blurred. "She's in treatment. If it's the same woman, she uses the name Sarah Bennett, pays in cash, doesn't have insurance, but she matched the description on your flyer. Same eyes." "Is she here now?" "No. Her appointment was yesterday. She won't be back until next Tuesday." 5 days. They had 5 days to wait. Claire left Daniel and Leo at the apartment and spent those 5 days blanketing the area around the clinic with flyers. Daniel spent them in a haze of anxiety and hope and terror. Emma was alive. She was getting treatment, but she was still hiding, still using a fake name, still not ready. On Tuesday morning, Daniel and Claire arrived at the clinic an hour before Emma's appointment. They sat in the waiting room, trying to look casual, trying to blend in with the others waiting for care. Daniel had rehearsed what he'd say 1,000 times, but every version sounded wrong. 10 o'clock came and went. 11. By noon, the receptionist confirmed that Sarah Bennett had missed her appointment. She'd never missed before. "She knew," Claire said quietly as they walked back to the car. "Someone must have warned her we were looking." Daniel wanted to scream, wanted to tear the city apart looking for her. Instead, he drove back to the apartment in silence and tried to figure out what to do next. That evening, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered it with shaking hands. "Daniel." Her voice. After 3 years, Emma's voice, thinner than he remembered, scared, but unmistakably hers. "Emma," he breathed. "Oh my God, Emma. I heard you were looking for me. We're in Portland, me and Leo and Claire. We've been looking for months. Are you okay? Are you safe?" "I'm alive." A pause. "Claire's there?" "She's been looking for you for 3 years. She wants to apologize. We all just want to help." "Daniel, you can't be here. You have to take Leo and go home." "This is home now. We're not leaving, not without you." "I don't want you to see me like this." Her voice broke. "I don't want Leo to see me like this." "We don't care what you look like. We just want you back. It's not about what I look like." She was crying now. "It's about what happens next. I'm dying, Daniel. The treatment isn't working, and I won't let Leo watch that." Daniel felt the floor drop out from under him. "You don't know that. There are other treatments, other options. I've tried everything I can afford, everything that made sense, and it's not enough. So I came here to die quietly, away from everyone, where nobody would have to watch or feel obligated or—" "We're not obligated," Daniel interrupted. "We're your family. Leo is your son. You don't get to make this decision alone." "Yes, I do. It's my life, my death." "And his childhood," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "Emma, he's been asking about you for 3 years. He thinks you left because of him. He asked a stranger in a grocery store to be his mother because he's so desperate for someone to fill the hole you left. You don't get to do that to him. You don't get to die without saying goodbye." The line was silent for so long, Daniel thought she'd hung up. Then, "I'm scared." "I know, but you don't have to be scared alone anymore." More silence. Then, There's a park, Laurelhurst. Meet me there tomorrow at 2. Just you, not Leo, not yet. I need to see you first. I need to know if I can do this." "I'll be there," Daniel promised. "Emma, I'll be there." She hung up without saying goodbye. Daniel stood in the middle of his empty apartment and let himself cry for the first time since this had all started. Not from grief, from relief. She was alive. She was willing to see him. It wasn't over yet. He called Claire, told her what had happened. She cried too. Then he went into Leo's room where his son was already asleep and sat beside the small bed just watching him breathe. Tomorrow he'd see Emma. Tomorrow he'd have to be strong, composed, ready to convince her to come home. But tonight he let himself be broken. Tonight he let himself feel everything he'd been pushing down for 3 years. And when morning came, he'd have to figure out how to tell his 7-year-old son that his mother was dying, that she'd been dying all along, that the ending they'd been hoping for might not be the one they'd get. But at least they'd have an ending. At least they'd have the truth, and maybe if he could convince Emma to trust them one more time, they'd have something else too. Time. However much of it was left. Together. The park was green and wet from recent rain, droplets still clinging to the leaves. Daniel arrived 20 minutes early, sat on a bench near the duck pond, and tried to breathe normally. His hands shook. His chest felt too tight. At 2:05, he saw her. She walked slowly, carefully, like someone conserving energy. Emma had always been small, but now she seemed diminished, her frame lost in an oversized coat. The hair Patricia had described was growing back, short and uneven, dark roots showing grey. But her face, God, her face was still hers. Older, thinner, shadowed with exhaustion and pain, but unmistakably Emma. She stopped 10 feet away, just looking at him. Her eyes filled with tears. "Hi," she said, her voice barely audible. Daniel stood, wanted to run to her, wrap her in his arms, but something in her posture stopped him. She looked like she might bolt at any sudden movement. "Hi," he said back. They stood there, 2 people who'd promised forever, and then had it stolen by fear and sickness and terrible choices neither knew how to fix. "You look tired," Emma said. "You look alive." She laughed, a sound that turned into a cough. When it passed, she moved closer, sat on the bench, leaving space between them. Daniel sat too, careful not to crowd her. "Claire said the treatment isn't working," he said quietly. Emma nodded. "The cancer spread. Lungs now, maybe liver. They gave me 6 months, maybe a year if I'm lucky. That was 2 months ago." Daniel felt like he'd been punched. There has to be something else. Clinical trials, experimental treatments. I can't afford any of that. I don't have insurance. I've been paying cash for the chemo I'm getting, and that's almost gone through what little savings I had left. "Daniel, I ran out of options a long time ago. Then we'll find new ones. Together. You don't have to do this alone." Emma looked at him with an expression that was part longing, part despair. "Why would you help me? I left you. I abandoned Leo. I destroyed our family because I was too scared to stay." "Because we love you," Daniel said simply. "Because you're Leo's mother. Because despite everything, you're still the woman I married. And that woman wouldn't give up. That woman died 3 years ago. No, she didn't. She's sitting right here, scared and sick and stubborn as hell, but alive, fighting." Emma wiped at her face with the sleeve of her coat. "I don't deserve forgiveness. Maybe not, but you're getting it anyway. From me, from Claire, and from Leo when you're ready to see him." At her son's name, Emma's face crumpled. "I don't know how to face him, how to explain, how to tell a 7-year-old that his mother is dying." "The same way I did," Daniel said, "with honesty, with love, by letting him say goodbye properly instead of spending the rest of his life wondering why you left. What if it breaks him? What if it heals him? What if knowing the truth, being part of this, helps him understand that sometimes people make terrible choices out of love? That you didn't leave because he wasn't enough, but because you loved him too much. Emma was silent for a long time, staring at the ducks on the pond. A family walked past, parents and two children laughing at something. Normal, easy, everything Emma and Daniel would never have again. "I'm in a studio apartment in a bad part of town," Emma said finally. "I have almost no money left. The treatment makes me so sick I can barely work. I'm not the mother Leah remembers. I'm not anyone he'd